I stood by the French doors of my estate, watching the lavish pre-wedding gala I'd paid for. My daughter Emily twirled in her designer dress, a vision in white and gold. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over imported roses and gold-trimmed everything. After 30 years of building my business empire, I thought this was the pinnacle of my happiness. Watching my only child marry into a prominent family, while my beautiful wife of 3 decades beamed at my side. I was wrong. Hidden in the shadows of a marble column, I became invisible to the 2 women I loved most in this world. Claire, my elegant wife, stood with Emily near the grand staircase, both clutching champagne flutes. I was about to step forward to join them when Claire's words froze me in place. "I can't believe the old fool paid for all this," she sneered, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Emily smirked. "We only have to pretend for 3 more weeks." "The moment the honeymoon starts, I file for divorce," Claire whispered, leaning closer to my daughter. "I get half the estate, the accounts, everything. You'll have your trust fund, the yacht, the Paris apartment. He'll be left with nothing but his stupid business cards." Emily giggled viciously. "Cheers to Dad, the world's richest doormat." My hand tightened around my own champagne glass until I thought it might shatter. 30 years of marriage, 26 years of fatherhood, all of it, a calculated charade. But I showed no emotion. Not yet. My name is Edward Halston. At 56, I'm the founder and CEO of Halston International, a global logistics and supply chain corporation I built from nothing. I started in a basement office with second-hand furniture and a single phone line. Now I employ over 15,000 people across 23 countries. I met Claire at a charity gala when I was making my first million. She was 24, a former beauty queen turned marketing executive with amber eyes and a laugh that could light up a room. I proposed 6 months later. Back then, I was too busy building my empire to notice the calculatedness behind her smile. We had Emily 2 years into our marriage. I still remember holding that tiny bundle in my arms, making silent promises to give her everything I never had. My own father had abandoned us when I was 9, leaving my mother to raise 3 children on a waitress's salary. I swore my child would never know want or neglect. Perhaps I overcompensated. Emily's childhood was a parade of privileges: private schools, horse riding lessons, summers in Europe, winters in the Caribbean. Claire insisted our daughter deserved the best of everything, and I never questioned it. I was often away on business, building the fortune that funded their lifestyle. "Your father works so hard because he loves us," I overheard Claire tell Emily once when she was about 10. Now I wonder if that statement had always been followed by mocking laughter when I wasn't around. I had been loyal to a fault. Despite opportunities and advances over the years, and there were many in my position, I never strayed. Claire was my wife, my partner, the mother of my child. That meant something to me. Apparently, it meant something very different to her. Looking back, the signs had been there for years. I was simply too trusting, or perhaps too preoccupied, to see them. There was the time 5 years ago when Claire lost her anniversary diamond bracelet, only for me to discover later that she'd sold it to fund a secret spa retreat with her friends. When confronted, she cried and claimed she was depressed and needed self-care. There were the mysterious weekend charity events that left no trace in social media or society pages, the credit card charges at hotels in neighboring cities when she was supposedly visiting her sister. And Emily, my princess, had grown increasingly distant after college. She'd call only when she needed something: a new car after she wrecked the Mercedes, money to invest in a friend's startup that never materialized, a down payment for a Manhattan apartment she barely used. Last Christmas, I overheard Emily on the phone in her childhood bedroom. "Mom's working on it," she had said to someone. "The old man's going to set up a trust for the wedding. We just need to be patient." I'd assumed she was talking to her fiance about financial planning. How naive I was. 6 months ago, Claire began meeting more frequently with our family lawyer, citing estate planning concerns. "We're not getting any younger, Edward," she'd said with an affected sigh. "We need to make sure Emily is protected." I agreed. I'd always planned to leave everything to my family anyway. What I didn't know was that Claire had been exploring ways to access my assets immediately, not after my death. She'd been laying groundwork, building a case, documenting fabricated evidence of emotional neglect and financial control. My executive assistant, Margaret, who had been with me for 15 years, tried to warn me. "Mr. Halston, Mrs. Halston requested copies of all your financial holdings yesterday," she told me 3 months ago. "I thought you should know." I dismissed her concerns. "Claire's just being thorough about the wedding expenses," I said. Margaret gave me a long look but said nothing more. The final piece fell into place 2 weeks before I overheard their conversation at the gala. My private banking manager called me directly rather than going through my assistant. "Mr. Halston, I wanted to confirm the transfer authorizations personally," he said. "It's unusual to move funds of this magnitude to offshore accounts without prior discussion." I had authorized no such transfers. When I investigated, the request had come from an email address nearly identical to mine, with a single character difference. The account details belonged to a shell company I later discovered Claire had established through her cousin, a minor banking executive. The attempt failed due to security protocols, but the intent was clear. They weren't just planning to take half in a divorce. They were trying to take everything. After overhearing Claire and Emily at the gala, I retreated to my study. My hands trembled as I poured a glass of 30-year-old scotch, a bottle I'd been saving for Emily's wedding day. I sat in darkness, the only light coming from the gardens where 200 guests celebrated a union that was nothing but a calculated extraction of wealth. Years of memories flashed through my mind. Claire's face when I surprised her with her dream house on our 10th anniversary. Emily's graduation day when she hugged me and whispered, "I couldn't have done it without you, Dad." All lies, performances to keep the cash flowing. Around midnight, Claire came looking for me. She entered without knocking, perfectly coiffed even after hours of socializing. "There you are," she said, her voice honey-sweet. "Everyone's asking where the father of the bride disappeared to." I looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. Behind the practiced smile and carefully maintained beauty, I saw calculation, coldness, a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "Just needed a moment," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Big crowds, you know." She approached, placed her hands on my shoulders and kissed my cheek. I smelled expensive champagne and the French perfume I'd bought her last month. "Don't stay away too long," she purred. "This is all for Emily, for our family." Family. The word echoed in my mind like a cruel joke. When the door closed behind her, I made my decision. This wasn't a marriage. It was a long con, and I refused to be the punchline any longer. I would not rage. I would not confront. I would not give them any warning. I would be as calculating as they had been, but more efficient, more thorough. I picked up my phone and called the one person I knew I could trust. "Marcus," I said when my old friend and attorney answered, "I need your help with something urgent and completely confidential. Can you come to my office first thing tomorrow and bring Patricia from the forensic accounting team?" For the first time that night, I smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Over the next 2 weeks, I became the perfect doting father and husband. I signed checks without comment. I nodded enthusiastically at wedding details. I posed for family photos with my arm around Claire's waist, smiling as if I hadn't heard her planning to destroy me. No one, not even Margaret, knew what I was doing behind the scenes. Marcus and his team worked around the clock, implementing a plan I had privately called Operation Exodus. Every asset, every account, every property underwent a transformation. The first step was securing what couldn't be hidden. I established an irrevocable charitable foundation, the Halston Family Foundation for Children's Education and Veterans Support. I transferred 75% of my wealth into it, with a board of trustees selected for their impeccable ethics and loyalty to me. Once the assets entered the foundation, they could never be retrieved through divorce proceedings or inheritance claims. Next came the business restructuring. I converted my ownership in Halston International into a complex web of voting and non-voting shares, beneficial interests, and management rights distributed among several entities. On paper, I owned almost nothing. In practice, I controlled everything. For the remaining liquid assets, Marcus created a series of legitimate offshore structures, the very thing Claire had attempted and failed to do clandestinely. The difference was that mine were bulletproof, established with every legal protection available. Patricia, meanwhile, gathered evidence. Her team recovered deleted emails, text messages, and recorded phone conversations from company devices Claire and Emily had used over the years. They documented the attempted fraudulent transfer, the pattern of financial exploitation, and the planned conspiracy. Most critically, I hired Denham Investigation Services, a discreet firm specializing in high-profile surveillance. For 10 days, they documented Claire's meetings with her divorce attorney, recorded conversations between my wife and daughter discussing the plan, and, most devastatingly, captured evidence of Claire's long-running affair with Gerald Wilson, my former business partner, and one of the wedding's distinguished guests. While all this was happening, I amended my will with provisions that would activate if challenged. If either Claire or Emily contested anything, they would trigger clauses that would expose their conspiracy publicly and initiate criminal investigations. The final piece was the most difficult. Emily's fiance, Thomas Blackwell, came from one of the city's oldest and most respected families. He seemed to genuinely love my daughter, and I had liked him from our first meeting. I debated whether to warn him, to show him what kind of woman he was marrying. 2 days before the wedding, I made my decision. I met Thomas for lunch, ostensibly to discuss a wedding surprise for Emily. "Thomas," I said carefully, "before you marry my daughter, there's something I need to ask you. Do you love Emily for who she is, not what she has, or what she might inherit?" His answer was immediate and sincere. "Of course, sir. I'd marry Emily if she didn't have a penny to her name. Our family's wealth has nothing to do with our relationship." I nodded, studying him. He was either the best actor I'd ever met, or a decent young man about to make a terrible mistake. "Good," I replied, "because a true marriage is built on honesty and loyalty, not material things." I didn't warn him. Instead, I included him in my plan, not as a conspirator, but as someone who deserved to know the truth at the same moment everyone else would. The stage was set. The trap was laid. Now, all that remained was the execution. The wedding day arrived sunny and clear, as if nature itself approved of my plan. 500 guests filled the cathedral, followed by a reception at the Blackwell family's historic estate. Celebrities, politicians, business leaders, everyone who mattered in our social circle had come to witness what the society pages were already calling the wedding of the decade. I played my part flawlessly. I walked Emily down the aisle, my face a mask of fatherly pride. I shook Thomas's hand firmly at the altar. I kissed Claire on the cheek as we took our seats in the front row. No one saw the small nod I gave to Marcus, seated 3 rows back. The ceremony proceeded without a hitch. Emily and Thomas exchanged vows that now struck me as particularly ironic coming from my daughter's lips. I promised to be faithful and honest. At the reception, I danced with my daughter for the traditional father-daughter dance. She leaned close, her smile dazzling for the photographers. "You really outdid yourself, Daddy," she whispered. "Your last big gift to me." I smiled back. "Indeed it is." As the dance ended, I squeezed her hand. "I'm so proud of the woman you've become," I told her. It wasn't entirely a lie. I was impressed by her commitment to the long con. She had learned from the best, after all. The reception dinner proceeded through its courses. Champagne flowed. Toasts were made. Claire kept glancing at her watch, no doubt counting down the hours until she could meet with her attorney to file divorce papers. Finally, the moment arrived for the father of the bride to give his toast. I approached the microphone, champagne glass in hand. The crowd hushed in anticipation. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice steady. "Family and friends, today is a momentous day, not just for Emily and Thomas, but for all of us who have watched these young people grow." I paused, scanning the room. Claire smiled encouragingly. Emily looked bored but maintained her camera-ready smile. "Before I give my blessing to this union, I have a special gift. A surprise, you might say, for my beloved family." I nodded to the technical staff. The lights dimmed, and the massive screens positioned around the ballroom flickered to life. What followed was 10 minutes of meticulously edited footage. Claire and Emily, in their own words, detailing their plan to strip me of everything. Claire with Gerald in intimate situations. Documentation of attempted financial fraud. Text messages between mother and daughter laughing about how they had manipulated me for years. The room fell silent except for gasps and whispers. I watched faces transform from confusion to shock to horror. Thomas's parents, paragons of old money dignity, sat rigid with disbelief. Thomas himself had gone pale, his eyes fixed on Emily with dawning comprehension. When the presentation ended, the lights came up. I stood calmly at the microphone, surveying the damage. Claire had risen halfway out of her seat, her face a mask of fury and fear. Emily sat frozen, her perfect makeup unable to hide her panic. "As of yesterday," I continued in the same pleasant tone, "every asset, every bank account, every trust, every property title has been legally and permanently moved beyond the reach of those who sought to take them through deception. The Halston family's resources will now serve children's education and veteran support, causes far more deserving than funding betrayal." I lifted my glass. "I'd like to propose a toast to truth, to consequences, to justice." Before anyone could react, uniformed officers and men in suits entered the ballroom from several doors. Marcus approached the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Marcus Winters, legal counsel for Mr. Halston and the newly established Halston Family Foundation. I regret to inform you that this reception must conclude early due to unforeseen legal matters. Those served with papers are requested to remain for processing. All other guests are free to depart." The officers moved directly to Claire, Emily, and Gerald, serving them with papers for fraud, conspiracy, and in Gerald's case, corporate espionage related to information Claire had stolen from my company for him. Thomas stood abruptly, removing his boutonniere and dropping it into his champagne glass. "The wedding is off," he announced, his voice carrying in the stunned silence. He looked directly at Emily. "I don't know who you are, but you're not the woman I thought I was marrying." His parents followed him as he strode from the room, their faces rigid with humiliation and anger. Claire finally found her voice. "You can't do this!" she shrieked, lunging toward me. 2 security personnel stepped between us. I met her gaze calmly. "I already did." Emily began to sob, mascara running down her cheeks. "Daddy, please! You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I replied, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "I understand 30 years of lies. I understand a daughter who values yachts and apartments over her father's love. I understand completely now." I turned to the remaining guests. "I apologize for the disruption to what should have been a joyous occasion. Please know that any gifts you brought will be donated to charity, and the dinner you missed will be delivered to the downtown homeless shelter tonight." Then I walked out, leaving chaos behind me. Outside, my car waited. Not the Bentley Claire had insisted I buy last year, but the modest Audi I kept at the office. As I slid into the driver's seat, I felt lighter than I had in decades. It was done. The legal proceedings that followed were swift and brutal. Claire's carefully laid divorce plans crumbled when faced with the mountain of evidence against her. Instead of walking away with half my fortune, she faced charges of attempted fraud, forgery of my signature on multiple documents, and conspiracy. Her affair with Gerald became public knowledge when he attempted to claim she had shared my company's proprietary information under duress. The corporate espionage charges against him were particularly satisfying. He lost his own company when his board forced him out amid the scandal. Emily's humiliation was complete. Abandoned by her fiance and his powerful family, cut off from the trust fund she had taken for granted, she faced not only legal consequences, but social exile. The society pages that had once fawned over Chicago's golden daughter now ran headlines like, "The Wedding Scammer, Heiress Exposed in Shocking Betrayal." Thomas, to his credit, handled the situation with dignity. He issued a brief statement saying he was deeply disappointed and requesting privacy. 6 months later, I sent him a letter, not to apologize, but to express my respect for how he had conducted himself and to assure him that I had always believed him innocent of any knowledge of the conspiracy. He never responded, which I understood. Claire fought the charges until the evidence became insurmountable. Faced with the prospect of prison, she accepted a plea deal that left her financially ruined, legally restricted from accessing any Halston assets, and thoroughly disgraced. Her society friends vanished overnight. Her cousin at the bank was fired. Her sister, who had alibied her charity weekends, stopped taking her calls. Last I heard, she was working as a sales associate at a department store in Phoenix, living in a studio apartment, her beauty fading without the expensive treatments she could no longer afford. Emily proved more pragmatic than her mother. She cooperated with prosecutors, turning over evidence against Claire and Gerald in exchange for reduced charges. She gave a tearful interview to a second-rate entertainment show, claiming she had been manipulated by her mother and was heartbroken to have hurt her beloved father. I didn't watch it. Margaret told me it was pathetic. Emily now works as an event coordinator's assistant in Los Angeles, a humbling position for someone who once expected to manage a multi-million-dollar trust fund. She emails occasionally, her messages filled with apologies and pleas for reconciliation. I read them but never respond. Some betrayals cut too deep for forgiveness. As for me, I stepped back from the daily operations of Halston International, appointing a trusted protege as CEO while remaining chairman of the board. The Halston Family Foundation has become my primary focus, funding educational opportunities for underprivileged children and support services for veterans. I sold the mansion, too many ghosts in those elegant rooms, and moved to a comfortable but modest lakeside home where I can fish and read and think. Sometimes I wonder if I was too harsh, too absolute in my retribution. Then I remember the cold calculation in their voices that night at the gala, the years of deception, the thorough betrayal of everything I thought we shared. No, I decided. They had chosen their path with open eyes and malice aforethought. I simply let them reach their destination, just not the one they had planned. 1 year after the wedding that never was, I stood on my dock at sunset, watching the light fade over the water. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret, who had remained loyal throughout the ordeal and now ran my foundation's daily operations. "The Claire situation handled," it read. "Judge denied her petition to revisit settlement. Again." I smiled and put the phone away. Justice, like revenge, was a dish best savored slowly. "You both played the game," I said to the empty air. "You both lost. I simply let you." And for the first time in 30 years, I was truly, completely free. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.